Welcome to this week's session. Excited to be back here with you all with another hopefully helpful topic. This week, I am joined by Rick Fiala, who is Senior Client and Implementations Manager here at Infinix. This week, we are going to touch on a topic that is really important to the success of your revenue cycle. We're going to talk about how to create a successful, good working relationship or partnership with your revenue cycle technology vendors. So welcome, Rick. We're glad to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me, Kate.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in. In a perfect world, what does a successful relationship look like between a revenue cycle vendor and a healthcare provider?
In a perfect world, huh? Well, we both love the Denver Broncos. That would be a good start. But we're going to go with no. But seriously, I think at the top of the list there, in a perfect world, would be reliability and the trust are basically through the roof. On both sides. I mean, we're talking about reliable task delivery. We're talking about a positive financial income for both sides. I think are really important. Full transparency on both sides as well. And also something that always seems to come up when you're implementing technology, you're going to have some bumps in the road. If we could eliminate those bumps and have no data delays, no delays in reaching milestones or having perfect scores during testing, I think those would be ideal, and that would be great in a perfect world. And also I think it's really important is the provider's in a positive place compared to where they were their previous workflow for their RCM. So those are some of the things I think that would be great in a perfect world for a successful relationship between rev cycle vendor and the provider.
Great. Who on the provider side should manage that relationship, in your opinion?
Well, yeah, I think probably there should be a main point of contact, and that's typically a project manager and or the person who is closest to doing that work. The person that's actually, they're in the weeds every day, trying to looking at RCM and trying to make it better or actually doing the tasks. However, I think each person from the provider that's involved in the task, they all have to be involved in cultivating that relationship and in the implementation. So I think it's it's twofold: a main contact, and then each person that's involved with the project needs to help with that relationship.
Great. How can providers set those relationships up for success during the onboarding process? And then also maintain that relationship.
Yeah, and maintaining it is very important. But maintaining full transparency throughout the implementation is so important, and I can't stress that enough. And also setting realistic expectations. So, I mean, as far as resources, we'll go back to resources. If the provider or the client, can't produce the FTEs we need to implement our project on time, then they must have an expectation, and it should be realistic that the project will be delayed and the go live will be delayed. So setting realistic expectations and also having realistic expectations on the client side is really important. And like I talked about before, resource accessibility and availability are two things that are so important to stay on track. Those folks need to be present during project meetings. They need to be available to answer questions when we run into roadblocks of some sort. They need to be available to help us test and to sign off on testing, on user acceptance testing. So those are some really important things for success during the onboarding process.
What questions should I ask if I'm a provider during the sales process? Because as you said, that's kind of step one in getting that relationship off on the right foot. So what should be asked?
Exactly. And one, I'm going to go back to resources. If I was going to implement some technology, I would want to know, what resources do I need to have available to help you to be successful and meet your timelines? That's probably number one. What, as far as your expectation from our software, what are some of your use cases and what are you trying to solution for? And I think that needs to be communicated definitely with the salesperson. It needs to be asked.
Right.
What is the timeline for onboarding? That's important as well. I mean, if we purchase your product, how long is it going to take for us to be live and to experience a return on our investment? I think, what are the methods of communication during the project? I mean, is it mostly via email? Do you have maybe a collaborative software that I can give you access to so that you can monitor the tasks in the project? Do we use any type of chat messaging tool to communicate with you, or do we just communicate via email? So those are some of the things. Do we do web meetings all the time? Do you come on site in person? I think all of those things are important. And then I would, as a client, I would ask for past success with your past clients in implementation of the same tools that I have purchased. And I would ask how many clients you've been successful with. And I'd also make sure that what I'm buying is actually a current product and not something that might be in testing right now that's just been created, unless of course, you're a beta test partner. So those are some important things I think I would ask.
Good. What about red flags during the sales process? And not to bash salespeople, but their job is to sell. So what should I look at in terms of red flags that might hinder that relationship?
Hey, I'll tell you, I'll go back to it again. Is the salesperson, are they selling you an existing product? So that's something that might be a red flag. And, if you're willing to go in there and purchase a product that has been just created, just make sure that your expectations are set on the fact that it is a new product. And it's also, you might run into some bumps in the road. So just set your expectation there if that's the case. And trust your gut. I mean, when you're in discussions with somebody, and this goes for, probably every aspect of life, trust your gut and ask more questions if you're not understanding the implementation process, or you're not understanding maybe the capabilities of what you're buying, and continue to ask those questions until you're crystal clear. All right. So that's gonna help you know exactly what you're getting into. So trust your gut. And also, if you're asking a lot of questions, they're not readily available from your salesperson, then A, be sure to follow up, and B, make sure that I would expect they would be prepared. But if they're saying, hey, let me, I don't know the answer to that, let me go check on it, that's when you need to be leery. But always make sure you follow up on those. Let me see. And then I would say, check on if you have a subscription like the Net Promoter Score or their class scores or anything like that. Make sure that they're positive scores. And the salesperson should be able to rattle those off to you as well. So that's something that I would definitely look for in terms of red flags.
What about post-implementation? Everyone seems to be very, excited. It's implementation. And I think folks can kind of set it and forget it until all of a sudden, an issue pops up. Do you have any recommendations for just how to continue to nurture that relationship so that it's successful on both sides?
Yeah, and I think just we do assign, after onboarding a client, we do have a CSM that stays on board to take care of that client. Plus, one thing that we always do is we have a transitions team that monitors our new clients and their go live up to 90 days after go live. And we're very responsive to them. So I think that's something that needs to be closely watched to make sure, it's like a don't break period. Make sure that nothing is breaking throughout that 90-day period, and that we work out all other kinks. So I think there's got to be a high level of touch up to 90 days after that go live. And that way, that also helps our clients feel a little bit more secure that, if they do have an issue or something pops up, we can be very agile and bounce in there and take care of that problem immediately. So those are some of the, and I don't see anything wrong with even having weekly just update meetings. If you need them, get them on the calendar. And if you don't need them, cancel them. So those are some of the things I think are important post go live. And like I said before, evaluating your implementation after go live, I think that's an important thing. And both internally for us at Infinx, and also that we have our clients evaluate the job that we did, what they were happy with, what we could get better at, etc.
Yeah, we had Jason on from NI2 a few weeks ago talking about system conversions, and that, don't forget about testing post go live. We talked a lot about that. So super important there as well. And I would also say that what you just said, is there a transition team? Am I assigned a CSM? Those are all also good questions to ask during the sales cycle.
Good point. Yes.
What does that look like? So what about reporting? So a lot of revenue cycle vendors tend to send these kind of generic canned reports, accuracy was this, denials were this, and it's really not giving a lot of actionable intelligence. So what are your recommendations in terms of reporting?
Well, I think, throughout the onboarding process, I think it's really important to do timeline updates if anything has changed. Yeah. So what we do is schedule weekly status meetings and updates with the client and let them know. We report back and report out on how our tasks are doing and how we're doing on our timeline and staying where we need to be. After go live, I think I talked about it a little bit. A project retrospective is important to have. What went well, what didn't go well, any areas of opportunity. And that should be that project retrospective, like I said before, it should be bi-directional. It should be from the client and from our internal team as well. I think reporting initially on like cases per week, just in staying in, again, high touch. And sometimes I think we've even had some of our CSMs even report cases daily for the first week or two. So eventually it'll taper off and just see if we're getting what we expected, what volumes were agreed upon during the sales cycle, and what we're actually seeing in a live production environment is important. If we're ramping up, how we're doing with the ramp up process. For instance, you're starting off with perhaps, 2 provider offices and then moving to 4 the next week and then moving to 12 the next week. So if there is a ramp up plan, it's important to report out on that on a weekly basis. And then let me see. And then also, I think as far as reporting out, I think the client has basically a responsibility as well as reporting out to, NPS and class or CSAT, just all those survey companies. I mean, it would be really helpful to complete those to communicate any feedback you have on the implementation process in the go live. So, granted this, you asked me what practices should expect, but I gave you a little bit about on both sides. So, that's what I think after go live.
Awesome. And if the vendor is not giving you reporting, that also is a red flag. Or if it's super vague, ask for more reporting, ask for more
That's a good point.
details.
Great
So
point.
yeah, I mean, I've seen reporting where like coding, for example, oh, we're at a 97% accuracy rate, but then you look at denials and you've got all these coding denials. And so if the numbers aren't matching up and if there's a discrepancy there, you need to ask for more detail. Don't just always sign off, look at those reports. I know we all go into these relationships hoping everything's going to be great. This new technology is going to solve a lot of challenges. But what happens if that relationship goes south? Any recommendations on when or how to salvage it, or at what point do you just say, this isn't working and cut ties?
Yeah, that's always missed. That's unfortunate, but that does happen.
Right.
I think what we talked about, especially from the beginning of this interview, is important that the communication and the expectations are clearly communicated from the outset, and that they are communicated, reviewed, and re-communicated throughout the process. I think is really a good practice. But I would, if the relationship does go south, I would escalate on both sides, and basically in an attempt to turn around and head north again. And in most instances, like the tool capabilities they were miscommunicated some way or were misunderstood, and the expectation of the client was set inappropriately. And I think another reason why they need to make sure they ask more questions if they're unsure of what they've purchased or any explanation. I mean, going out there and reading about a software and what it does, I think you need to ask more questions than what you're going to read on a website. And I think you need to understand exactly what it's going to take to implement. And I think you need to understand completely what you purchased. And again, asking those questions, and then plus on a vendor side, communicating clearly and in the terms that the client can understand exactly what they're buying, exactly what they can expect. I think those are the things that cause the projects from going south. But salvaging it, escalate to both sides, and attempt to turn around and head north again, talk about it, talk about what went wrong, be very transparent, and then decide whether you want to continue or whether you want to sever ties. And if you have a better answer than that, Kate, please share, because I'd like to hear it.
No, I mean, I think it goes back to setting expectations from the sales cycle through onboarding, implementation. I think that's super important and sets the tone for the relationship going forward. I also think having the right people in the room from the beginning is also important. It seems like a lot of practices, and everybody's busy. A lot of them are short-staffed, lack of bandwidth is an issue, but like having someone kind of pop up either mid-sales cycle, mid-implementation, that is an important piece of the process that has not been involved can always turn things in the wrong direction sometimes. So I think that's really important. But I think it's what you said, just being completely transparent with any challenges. Don't let things get to a place where they're kind of boiling over and you're beyond frustrated. And make sure you've got a really, really strong relationship with your client success manager. I think that's also very, very important. And during the sales cycle, that's something that you should be asking, who will I be interacting with post go live? Do I have one point of contact, or am I just kind of passed around? Obviously, the answer you want is one point of contact that's responsible for helping you navigate any challenges. They're the go-between. That's important. You shouldn't have, a whole list of, if it's this, you've got to reach out to this person, this, that. clients don't have time for that. So
yeah, and we assign client success managers from day one of the project. So that person's involved, maybe at a little higher level until go live, but they're around and they're involved in the whole entire process, implementation process.
right, which is how it should be. I mean, that way they know from the beginning they're involved, which is, it's super important. Any last minute words of advice?
Yeah. Be nice to your friendly Infinx implementation team. They're doing everything they can to make your experience a success and enjoyable. That's for dang sure.
That is true.
And that's what our goal is. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. This was great. Lots of really, really good information for everyone.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, Kate. Thanks for your time, everybody.
Bye-bye.